one little known fact about me is that when I was in college, I was really into pro wrestling, like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, the WWF versus WCW wars. Those were the peak years when I was in college, and it was incredibly, incredibly popular. I actually loved it so much and thought it was such an interesting phenomenon that I wrote my senior thesis on professional wrestling. I majored in American studies with an emphasis in journalism and media. And so I asked my professor if I could write about pro wrestling for my thesis. And he just looked at me like I was crazy. And he's like, "You're going to have to convince me that this is worth writing your paper about." One bizarre thing about pro wrestling is that wins and losses and championships don't really matter because it's part of a bigger storyline. There is no 2024, 2030, 2005 champions the way that there is in sports, like in baseball or football or basketball, because there's no off season. Characters have matches not to win or lose, but to advance a storyline. And so if someone was deemed a 14-time world champion, what that really means in reality is that they lost the championship 13 times. They didn't win it 14 years in a row because there's nothing really like that. What really matters is story, ratings, and popularity, not wins and losses. And I think that is such an appropriate analogy for what I'm kind of talking about today. Because if you are someone who works real hard and you grind, you're putting in the time, you may not really have an off season. I've met and befriended and worked with a lot of high achieving people in my life. I will say that many of them struggle with taking time off. Many of them struggle with taking their foot off the gas. Maybe they're a little fearful about letting go of control. Maybe they're addicted to the stress. There are people who are like that, you know. Maybe you're one of them. I've certainly been there and I'm trying to get better. In the last couple of years, I started adopting this sort of counterintuitive mindset to force myself to change the narrative running through my mind that I just could not disengage from work. This idea that you can never unplug and never take time off is BS. It's a lie. Because if you had a health scare, you would absolutely take time off and you'd probably figure out a way to have things that you need to do get done without you. And so rather than wait for a health scare or wait for some tragic situation, pretend like it's happened now and do what you would do in that situation. Over the last couple of years, I've had several friends battle some really serious health challenges. Some have gotten sick, some have had surgery, some I thought were going to pass away. And I'll tell you what, when that moment comes, somehow we figure out how we're going to move things around and how we're going to get the things that need to get done. And if you run a business or you work at a company, whatever it is, like you figure out a way for the show to go on. So just pretend that you're sick for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. What would you do? What would you do tonight, tomorrow, if you woke up and you're like, wow, I really don't feel good. I'm just sick. What would you do? Then ask yourself what you would do and then go do it. Right. Maybe you would call somebody to help you out. Maybe you have someone on your team or someone in the business to help you out. Well, knock on wood, but imagine you got sick. Pretend you got sick. Pretend you were incapacitated and make those changes. There is a way forward. And if you are one of these high achieving people, I know that I will never convince you to take time off. It just doesn't compute in your mind. So I think where we want to start is with this idea in our mind that we think it's impossible to step back, but it is possible because if something that bad happened, you'd figure out a way, right? Unlike other sports with defined seasons, pro wrestlers, they work 52 years out of the year. They're on the road constantly. They don't travel together in team bus. They're mostly responsible for getting to the venue by themselves, right, in time for the next show. And they still have to maintain this appearance. They still have to maintain their conditioning and this look. And isn't that such an appropriate picture for what we see online now? Like you're trying to build a brand or you're trying to sustain this image and be this all-time, you know, grinding, hustling person. It's like an unsustainable pace. And unfortunately, a lot of professional wrestlers die very, very young because it's just not sustainable. They live at this crazy pace and they pump their body full of these substances, all for what? To maintain the look, right? To maintain the look. So I'm asking you, who are you working so hard to maintain this look for, right? Who are you? Why, right? To draw ratings, to get the likes, to get the engagements. There are other ways to do that and to systemize your business. But if you're just grinding and going full on every day, day in and day out, like it's just not sustainable. Several years ago, I took all of the month of December off. The next year, I took both all of June and all of December off. And wouldn't you know it, I figured it out. I just pretended, what would I do if I got COVID or what if I got sick or something happened to a loved one and I was, having to offer support and care 24/7 for 3, 4 weeks at a time? What would I do? Who would I call? Who would I hire? What systems would I put in place? What would I say no to and get off the calendar? And I don't know about you. I tend to fill my calendar with things. Like if there's an empty space there, like I figure out how to go do something and take another call and take an appointment because I'm always like, all right, what's the next deal? What's the next contract? What's the next launch? What's the next thing that I have to do? What's the next event to go to? What's the next potential partnership? Yada, 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 yada. And you realize, and I realized this, taking that time off, most of it didn't really matter. Now, I'm only sharing one side of the story here because there are other times in life where you have to put the pedal to the floor and really accelerate and sometimes take on more than you feel that you can take. And you have the juice for that too, but not 52 weeks a year, no off season, pumping your body full of stuff to keep up it is, right? That's just not sustainable, right? Not sustainable. So I hope this resonates with you in some way. And I'd love to know when your next extended period of time off is going to be. Let me know, leave a comment, and take a break.